and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. Chicago Public Schools' new budget relies on more state funding. But what's the appetite for that in Springfield? Two state lawmakers share their thoughts.
Reaching out to local governments to identify sites for new reactors.
And we hear from communities in Illinois that are opening the door to new nuclear reactors. First off tonight, embattled U.S. Attorney Andrew Boutros says there's no need for a special prosecutor or contempt hearing over his office's handling of the so-called Broadview 6 case. In a 52-page court filing, the city's top federal prosecutor says, quote, "There can be no doubt that mistakes were made in the prosecution of this case." He also noted his office has been working to rectify those issues by dismissing the case, not contesting the former defendant's efforts to recoup legal fees, and instituting a remediation plan in his office. Last fall, 6 protesters were charged after a confrontation with federal immigration agents outside a holding facility in Broadview. A federal judge is expected to rule on the former defendant's special prosecutor request later this month. Chicago State University's inaugural football team is gearing up for its upcoming season, and the D1 players feel confident they're ready for a promising first season.
Am I ready? Overly ready. Ready is an understatement. I feel like we're trying to make history here.
We've been ready to go really since the spring. Like a lot of people, we ain't had no spring practice, but we were still out here putting in work, lifting every day, conditioning every day, getting closer as a team, just building that bond. And when summer came, it just came all together.
I'm just blessed to be able to have, this opportunity here in the city. I know the whole city's looking forward to it, and I know we've been putting in the hard work to get to show that off.
While CSU doesn't have an on-campus stadium just yet, they're using SeatGeek Stadium in Bridgeview for the time being. Their season kicks off August 29th against Roosevelt University. A musician known as the First Lady of Chicago Jazz has died. Geraldine DeHaas rose to musical fame in the 50s and 60s with her sibling group Andy and the Bay Sisters, blending jazz, gospel, and soul sounds. DeHaas later became a tireless jazz patron in Chicago for more than 4 years, or 4 decades, creating the Duke Ellington Tribute Concert in Grant Park back in 1974, paving the way for the now famous Chicago Jazz Festival. She was also part of a group of advocates who worked to save the South Shore Cultural Center, and she founded Jazz Unites, a nonprofit that worked to bring jazz to the public. Here she is on Chicago Tonight back in 2013 explaining why she believes jazz can unite people.
Jazz has the ability to have people come together to express how they feel about a certain situation, a certain song. But they can all come together on that kind of situation, because that's the element of the music. If you played with a band, you can express yourself how you feel about a certain tune, and somebody else can come up a minute later and express how they feel about it.
Geraldine DeHaas was 91 years old. Up next, state lawmakers discuss possible funding for Chicago Public Schools right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
After closing their own $2 billion deficit, Illinois lawmakers may spend the fall veto session looking for more funding for Chicago public schools. The Chicago Board of Education recently passed its budget assuming $150 million in additional state funding that hasn't been approved, money that board members say is needed to avoid layoffs. House Speaker Emanuel Chris Welch and Senate President Don Harmon say they're ready to pursue more funding for CPS, but the effort faces an uphill climb as lawmakers outside Chicago argue their school districts need more state support too. Joining us now are State Representative Will Davis, a Democrat from East Hazel Crest, who chairs the Elementary and Secondary Education Appropriations Committee, And on Zoom, State Senator Dave Severson, a Republican whose district includes portions of DeKalb, Kane, and McHenry counties. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Representative Davis, any changes to the state spending plan that would reach CPS in time to avoid mid-year cuts would require a 3/5 supermajority or a 3/5 vote, right? 3/5 majority vote in both chambers. Is there the political will in Springfield to get that done?
I don't know if specifically there's a political will to address just the CPS problem. My position has been that we need to look at using the education funding formula that we have, or evidence-based funding formula that we have, to not only address funding needs for CPS, but also funding needs for school districts throughout the state. If we look at their distance away from adequacy, using the adequacy target as the benchmark, then you could say that all school districts are in deficit. So therefore, in order to try to address those broader funding needs, we must look at the evidence-based funding model as a way to do it.
Senator?
Well, there is a formula in place, and that's our concern, is that if we take away from that formula and we try to give more funding to Chicago, that is going to create a significant problem, because, as you mentioned, other school districts are suffering too. And so if we change the evidence-based funding formula that we have in place, that is going to, I think, start an uproar from suburban school districts that have seen so much growth from people leaving Chicago, and their schools are struggling, to all the way to downstate. And so to change a formula now, I think, just opens up the floodgates. Chicago is going to have to make the tough decisions, like every other school district has had to do over the last few years.
So, Senator Severson, as we've said, obviously lots of other school districts across the state, very few of them, not all of them, nowhere near all of them, are at their benchmark or their level for adequacy under the state's evidence-based funding formula. Could this be sort of a pivot if you all should get back to Springfield and realize, you know what, maybe we need to Chicago's raised the problem, but all districts are facing this. Could we find money for more districts?
Well, certainly right now, the state can't find that kind of money. They're facing a significant budget shortfall going into this next year already. So finding those kinds of dollars would, I think, really be an issue. But we still think Chicago has room to make some, tough decisions like other schools have done. When you have, over 100 schools that are less than 50% vacancy, you've got a number of schools that have 30% of vacancy or 30% occupancy in the schools. They need to make tough decisions in Chicago, just like our suburban school districts have had to make. So I think before they come for more money, they need to look at, one, making the same decisions and tough budget decisions that our districts have had to make, and two, look at their own, how they could solve their own problem, just like every other district has had to do.
Representative Davis.
Well, I kind of disagree with the senator in that the adequacy targets are based on student population and what it needs to educate the students in that district. So that's a number that we can come up with. So not to discount schools that aren't filled appropriately, as the senator said, but we know what the adequacy target is for Chicago Public Schools. And we can get there. And I think if we continue down the road of progressive revenue, like we have done in the past budget year, and put more on the table, that we can get to the amount of resources that's necessary to help all school districts. Again, this is not just a Chicago public school system problem. It is a statewide problem to help districts get to their adequacy targets.
So that said, do you think in a potential fall veto session that you and your colleagues could come up with a plan to bring more school districts to adequacy?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if it's a matter of finding money, there were some things that were left on the table in terms of progressive revenue options that we didn't address. Digital ad tax, could possibly bring $1.2 billion in revenue to the state of Illinois. A couple of other tax decoupling from the federal government tax breaks, like tax breaks for investors who invest in opportunity zones, as well as closing the loophole that allows corporations to put money in tax haven countries and not account for it. If we close those loopholes and make that accountability measure available to us, those last two could bring $450 million in. So there are things that we can consider. And that's not to say that you shouldn't work to try to make the system work better, as the senator said, but we still need revenue just to address our adequacy targets within school districts. So school districts that are below the adequacy target, if we put more money on the table using some of these mechanisms, that is a way we can do it. I want to thank my colleague Lindsay LaPointe for giving me this information and helping me to understand how we can get there.
Even if you were to come up with those other maybe progressive revenue measures this fall, that does not give CPS, it's going to be some time before that money starts to come in. CPS is not going to have $150 in hand in the fall.
Well, I agree with you. They're not going to necessarily have it in hand this fall. But again, we've been putting $300 million new dollars into the tier distribution formula. Let's continue to do that. So if CPS really wants to help us, then let's work to make sure that we raise the amount of money going into the formula, and of which CPS is a direct beneficiary of those resources. I've even asked the State Board of Education to come up with numbers that if we were even to remotely look at what they need, what does that mean in terms of the allocation that must go into the formula in order to get there? I'm still waiting for them to come back with some data on that, but I think there's opportunities to get it done that benefit CPS in all schools.
Senator Severson, what do you say to some of those options that Representative Davis just named as ways to generate revenue for all school districts, not just
Sure.
CPS?
Well, we can't always look at raising taxes as the answer. That was the answer a few years ago. We've raised taxes and we're back into the same problem that we're in. So raising taxes may solve a short problem for a year or two, but if you don't get a handle on spending, if you don't do the common sense reforms that other districts have done, we're going to be right back in the same situation, except then we're going to have more taxes and more businesses leaving. So as a state, we need to look at growing our economy, improving our jobs climate. But as school districts, they have to make the tough decisions and the tough cuts to live within their means, just like every other business and every other taxpayer has to do. And local governments and school districts around the state have had to do. Chicago needs to make those tough decisions like other school districts have had to do. So, if they do that first and then they come back, then we can talk about it. But we don't think they've made the same painful decisions that other school districts have done.
By the painful decision, Senator, we've heard CPS mention multiple times layoffs, and they've had some layoffs this year, but the district has also said a lot of those teachers and aides will be rehired at other schools. Just it's part of a normal shift that they are down 164 school-based positions overall in the aggregate this year. Are those the kind of tough decisions that you think the district will have to just accept?
Since 2019, they're at they've got about 10,000 or 10% less students, and they've added about 15% increase in staffing. So when you're losing a student population and you're increasing staffing, that tells us that there's room there. As we mentioned, there are numerous schools that are at over 50% vacancies. There needs to be mergers of those districts, which would save significant dollars. Those are the decisions that every other school districts have had to make with closing schools, merging schools, reducing staff that's not classroom-related staff. Those are things other schools have had to do. Chicago needs to make those same tough decisions that our districts have had before they come back and look at asking for more money from the state.
All right. So we're out of time, but just so that our viewers know, I want them to know that under the Illinois evidence-based funding formula, 63% of Illinois school districts are below the 90% funding adequacy bar that was set by the EBF funding formula that was passed 11 years ago?
2017.
Yeah, in 2017. Okay. That's where we'll have to leave it. Best of luck to you both, Senator Dave Severson and Representative Will Davis. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Up next, why some communities across Illinois say they are interested in landing new nuclear facilities as the state lifts its moratorium.
Education reporting on Chicago Tonight is brought to you in part by Press Forward Chicago.
Illinois is one step closer to building its first new nuclear reactor in nearly 40 years. In February, Governor J.B. Pritzker directed state agencies to seek proposals for possible sites, and now the responses are in. From a prototype microreactor at the University of Illinois to communities that are navigating the energy transition, the state that leads the nation in making nuclear power is looking at what's next. Joining us are Nancy Norton, president of the Grundy County Economic Development Council, and Scott Sorrell, Peoria County administrator, as well as James Walker, the CEO of Nano Nuclear Energy. Thanks to all three of you for joining us. So Nancy, Grundy County, why is it suitable for a new nuclear plant?
Well, Grundy County's been home to nuclear for over 60 years. We find ourselves really in the center. We are the host to the Dresden Clean Energy Center, owned by Constellation. 20 miles to the east is Braidwood Nuclear Station, and 20 miles to the west is LaSalle Station. So we have a comfort with nuclear, we have the workforce for nuclear, we have the safety mechanisms in place, and frankly the infrastructure and the transmission to get power, to get the power out to the customers. So we think it's an ideal location. And
you mentioned Constellation, that's the owner-operator of the many of the existing nuclear facilities already in the state of Illinois.
Absolutely, yes they are.
What do the existing plants contribute to the state?
Well, I can't speak for all the plants, but I can tell you what they contribute in our community. So, you know, it's almost 1,800 megawatts of power, 700 jobs, probably approximately $26 million a year in property taxes to our local districts. And apart from the economic impact directly, we also have the benefit of being able to market our location to have power. As we all know, power is a real scarce commodity these days, and so we have transmission lines, we have power sources, power assets, and that's a really compelling case for advanced manufacturing and other renewable opportunities as well.
Scott, why Peoria County?
Well, we're in a different position. We have a closed coal-fired power plant that's owned by Vistra Energy. We have the same workforce qualities that the communities that have a nuclear power plant already have. We have the connectivity to the grid that many of those communities have. But I think where we separate ourselves is we've been very supportive and agnostic of all the alternative energy sources. We have some of the highest number of locally approved utility scale solar projects in the state. We're going to have 2 large utility scale wind turbine projects. Each one's going to be in excess of 100 turbines. And we are, at this point in time, not closing a door to nuclear, but making sure that that door stays open, and if the opportunity presents itself, to walk through that door.
James, what's different about what your company is working on at the University of Illinois?
So everyone's probably familiar with the traditional nuclear reactor systems, the big systems, but the new generation of reactors is just much smaller. It's been essentially shrunken down, and then it's allowed for nuclear to be deployed in ways it's never been deployed before. So mining sites, oil and gas sites, remote communities, islands, but our reactor is in the middle of a university. It's going to be powering the campus. So nuclear has never been deployed in that kind of flexible deployment model before, where the reactor will be, all the components will ship to site as a modular system, assembled there, and then begin to immediately output power. And the amazing thing about this new level of tech is it can be co-located with the customer. In this case, it's going to be surrounded by the university, surrounded by dorm rooms, and immediately just put power into the Abbott power plant. It's, you know, this could be very transformative, not just for the university and the state, but globally. This is deploying nuclear in ways it's never been deployed before.
Nancy, what do you think the timeline would be like for construction of a new facility?
It really depends on the facility. You know, the long lead times for what were historic big reactor nuclear facilities, the lead times are significant. But the SMRs, the small modular reactors, the micro reactors, all of those sorts of things, there's lots of technologies out there. We understand that there may be about 8 years out till they're absolutely, you know, to market and ready for market. But, you know, we're kind of waiting and seeing, but I know that the large reactors take a lot longer.
And when you say the large reactors, you mean like these that we're seeing on screen right now, the big silos that everybody's used to seeing when we're talking about nuclear power?
Exactly.
Scott, how long could a possible lead time be for construction? How could that affect planning for you?
I think from our perspective, we've identified a site, but it's in private ownership. It is ready to go. It's a business decision for Vistra Energy and whether or not they want to pursue it. And then you get into that lead time for how long it would take to produce a reactor. And realistically, we're thinking along the lines of the small modular reactors as well, in terms of what would fit our site. In terms of how that works for us, we want to see just a decision made in a timely fashion, and then we can plan to make sure that we've got adequate workforce or supplement the workforce that we already have, and continue to work on having good affordable housing, which our community has, and having no traffic congestion in our community, which is very prevalent up in the Chicagoland area and where most of the nuclear power plants are today.
Okay. James, what are some of the bottlenecks right now for building more reactors like the one that you're planning?
So I wouldn't say technology is the challenge. I would say there's been an underinvestment into nuclear infrastructure in general right across the country, and that's meant investment into conversion capability, enrichment, that whole fuel supply chain. And the government's, it's putting money back into it right now. I think the Biden administration, I think during his tenure, there was something like $10 billion that was put back into infrastructure building. So it's happening. It's one of the bottlenecks, I think, of deploying reactors en masse. But for instance, the reactors themselves, like if you take ours as an example, it's known tech, high temperature gas reactors. Even the fuel type, the TRISO fuel, has been qualified by the Department of Energy. The timeline and the roadmap to the commercial launch of these systems is pretty much certain, but it's having all of the components to be able to mass manufacture the reactors. That's going to be your challenge, and one of the major challenges will be that fuel supply chain.
Scott, Peoria County, you mentioned, of course, having a coal plant shut down several years ago, but you also mentioned, sort of being agnostic. You've also got some wind and some solar going on. What has that energy transition been like for your community?
So we're in a different energy grid than the Chicagoland area. We're in MISO, which is part of the Ameren service territory that's downstate, and we continue to see significant rate increases for our residents and small businesses alike. And we want to see ratepayer relief is a method of getting to that ratepayer relief. Having more nuclear power available so that whether it be data centers or large electricity users have guaranteed energy sources that aren't draining the existing power system. Absolutely, those are things that we're looking to see.
Nancy, we talked about new reactors not having been built for decades. Talk a little bit about the, the workforce and the expertise and where that would come from with this new age nuclear reactors that we're talking about.
So we're pretty fortunate. So like I said, Dresden Station operated by Constellation safely for over 60 years. So we have the construction workers that have been maintaining these nuclear plants all around. Again, we have 3 right in our area. Every year they do outages and turnarounds. So our trades are very skilled. They have the certifications to operate in the plants. And they know how to build them. And then also just from an operation perspective, again, we have over 700 employees at the Dresden Station alone. And so in our region, you figure we'll probably have a couple of thousand employees that understand how nuclear reaction and nuclear reactors work. And so I don't know to scale up would be that difficult for us, actually. We're really already there.
James, how do you expect smaller reactors like yours to be used in the future?
It's a good question, because some of the demand we're seeing is very diverse. Like data centers and AI have been a big conversation in the recent years, because even they're seeing that even if they've got all the gas they want, they're reaching capacity at the grid level to be able to output that necessary power. So, I mean, that's going to be one big off-taker of the power system, and that will hopefully supplement the grid and stop, utility bills rising as a consequence of tech companies having to take a lot of power off the grid system. But I see this technology being deployed quite worldwide. So you could see it across, mining projects, oil and gas, remote projects like desalination, vertical farms.
Yeah,
you can see this in remote communities that subsist off diesel.
A lot for us to keep our eyes on. I'm sure a lot of work for the 3 of you as you're looking to the future. That's why we'll have to leave it for now. Thanks so much to James Walker, Scott Sorrell, and Nancy Norton. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And that's our show for this Wednesday night. You can stream Chicago Tonight on our WTTW YouTube channel every evening and catch up on any programs you may have missed. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm working to preserve the dignity and rights of all individuals.